what's the cosmology that I am to consider with this? What kind of beliefs? Because I think that's kind of where you started with me, and that really helped. It's like, say, I need you to believe this about cosmology.
Okay, well, the first obvious statement is that we know that it is useful to study reality as having two polar dimensions. One might be called the material world, one might be called the spiritual world. So we understand that there exists something, a lot of people might call it God. When it comes down to the more sort of personal level, it might be the soul that exists beyond death, and that our work is aligned with giving consciousness to that aspect of who we are, that eternal aspect, that spiritual aspect of self. So we come at this knowing everyone is happy talking about words like God and soul. That's the work that we're engaged in. In particular terms, the cosmology that most influenced me to an excited level of, yeah, I really need to understand this, was the seven planes of consciousness in Sufism, which proposes that from unity down into the material world are dimensions of vibrations of light, and each is so distinct to be given a different name. So the earth plane is the slowest vibration of light, and it creates physical form. Before then, a less slow expression of light would be the astral plane, which is that world that contains our feelings and our thinkings, and it's real, but it's not got physicality to it. A more subtle type of reality would be experienced by the subtle organ of the heart. On the esoteric level, the heart center is able to perceive beauty and harmony and love. A fourth plane of consciousness would be a deepening of the heart's resonant sensitivity, and that would be courage and principle, and what I stand for, and honor and justice, and deeply held views of a different kind of love, not sentimental at all, but strong and heart of oak kind of energy. The fifth level, and they are associated vaguely with chakras, not exactly. The fifth level is what we speak into the world, what we invoke. That would be our visionary approach to life. That would be what we make sacred. It's the highest kind of expression of self in one sense. Above that would be the highest archangels, the absolute archetypes of existence, all life at the very highest form. St. Michael, St. Gabriel, all of these names that nobody really understands what they are, but there's this archangelic level. And each of these planes vibrates within us. If we can do the appropriate spiritual practices, we can know something of those planes. Beyond that is unity. So that cosmology of seven is underpinning everything that I do. And because it's a little bit difficult to understand, I've turned that form into the vernacular. So no is the earth plane, hello is the astral plane, thank you is the plane of the heart, goodbye is the plane of the hero is called, please associated with sacredness, sorry with the higher sixth plane of resonance, and yes is unity. So that's the seven word system. That cosmology is in everything I do. And when I applied that to Sabian symbols, I give you the sort of interpretation that I have of Mark Edmund Jones's work, and that's my website. And I've also used it to create the Elven Star, the septiles of any particular Sabian symbol.
Maybe we could define Sabian alchemy, but in the sense of what the goal is and what it is to treat, or what kind of a problem, or would somebody say, oh, I know the perfect thing. That's Sabian alchemy.
Well, it's meant to be universal, so there is no problem which we cannot address with Sabian alchemy. Sabian alchemy is founded on the basic idea that what you seek, you find. And
That's great.
if you've got a problem, then the best thing to do is to seek an answer. If you've got a vision, the best thing to do is to seek a realization of that vision. So whether you're coming towards the process with a problem or an opportunity, either way, it depends upon how clear and authentic and deeply felt your question is. And the main punch of this process is to force people into such a level of laser sharp clarity about their question that all the fluffiness, all the confusion and doubts and uncertainty burns off because you get the question exactly so. And then that really readily turns into an affirmation, which has got a spiritual practice to root it into sacredness. And that basically is the Sabian alchemy process in a nutshell.
Okay, perfect. And then there was a part that was a big evolution part for me. And it feels really important. So kind of beliefs as far as, yes, identifying soul, you have one, and where that fits in. And there was the part about the mirror aspect, or the solipsism, or the world is a mirror. And would you say that that's pretty essential?
Yep. Central to the teachings within Sufism is the idea that we make it all up. Every single thing that's going on is nothing more than a reflection out there on what's going on in here. That's the central spiritual philosophy in Sufism, as in any mystical tradition, which is called Solipsism. So when you know that as an article of faith, then blame is pointless. There's nobody to blame. Everything is a mirror of self. It also gives you the empowerment to change things. It's a very interesting exercise to look at a mirror with a neutral face for as long as you can, holding your own gaze as you look in the mirror. And at some point, that person looking back at you is going to start either looking a bit angry or a bit smiley. And as soon as you see whichever way it goes, you're going to go more deeply into that direction. It's really interesting exercise. And
Whoa.
it works. And if there's a principle called the worm, Ouroboros, a worm that's biting its own tail. And the reason that it's biting its tail is because it doesn't know that it's its own tail. It's biting a tail because it's so angry that someone's biting its tail. And that represents the same principle of don't look in the mirror angrily, because somebody will be looking back at you with more anger. You'll see it as more anger, you know.
Ooh, that is so powerful to really bring that home. And yeah, that's the kind of, yeah, I get the kind of what I was saying about cosmology. That's the kind of nugget that it's like, we need you to know this first, and take some time to, if you didn't know that, then take some time to really reflect on that and integrate it. That's big. So yeah, those core philosophies of Sufism that I think would be really good to build out. Are there any more? So there's about the soul.
I think that what is actually done in Sufism is a series of practices. Four. One would be like spiritual wisdom or philosophy, and we've been talking about that. But the other three would be particular practices. Very often they're done collectively. So the practices of sound, mantra, in other words, repeating the names of God. And Sufism studies the 99 beautiful names. And each of those 99 names of God represents states of being. So you'd have a particular body state, Ya Hak, Ya Hay, Ya Rahman, Ya Latif. These different body states associated with the practice that represent anchored resource states. The anchoring that is taught within NLP, where you can call up a resource state of your body by using a visualization and very often a word or a body gesture, and then you've got the power that you associate with those words. So we're practiced. We develop those anchored states, and there are others, deeper ones for deeper reasons on a very profound level. So that use of sound to create particular states and then have access to re-engage with them. So, for example, when I sit down to do my meditation in the morning, sometimes I just slip into it and there I am immediately, lovely. But very often I'm not. And I'm thinking about what I'm going to do later when I finish my meditation and all that. But if I actually pick up my beads, I've got some prayer beads. I pick up my beads, so I'm anchored into them, and I repeat particular words and I'm anchored into that, then my busy mind just is taken up. And I find it much easier after doing that to fall into a meditative state. So that's one example. Equally, if I'm in the garden trying to move something really heavy, I'll say, Ya Aziz, Ya Aziz, oh divine strength, I am strong, and I use it in the garden, and so on. So so there's those anchored states. There's also visualizations, or the use of light practices, and visualizations have the effect of molding the mind as much as the sound does, as much as the spiritual philosophy does. Light practices shift what's going on in the mind. All we're trying to do is to change the shape, the patterning of what's going on in the mind. The mind is nothing more than a series of habit patterns of synapses, usually. I thought this yesterday, so I'll think it again today. And that's all we do with the mind. Very rarely do we come up with something new and creative. And that's why creativity is so important. It's one of the three essential wisdoms of the Holy Trinity: creativity, evolution, and freedom. So the visualization process trains the mind away from habitual negativity towards the practice of light, the practice of positivity and faith. And the third is the breath. If you actually breathe in a very particular way and you can control exactly how you breathe, then you master your emotions and therefore your thoughts. So that represents the whole of Sufism, the way I've been taught it. I mean, there are various aspects like stories, poetry, and so on, but they can be allocated in those various categories that I've already mentioned.
So yeah, for me, I would like to know, what are some of those things that I can believe, or that I need to believe to engage with this. The world is a mirror, and so that brings in so much personal responsibility and presence, and then would you say that it's required to believe about the soul and have that be kind of the central focus in a way?
Um, it's useful. I don't really think that Sufism comes across as a dogmatic requirement in any respect at all. There is no scripture. There is no hierarchy of finger waggers who tell you what is and is not Sufism. But it's useful to believe in some things because that model seems to be mutually it checks out. All the bits that you believe check out together. It's a model that works. I don't really think belief is anything more than expedient. In the end, you either know something or you don't, and that knowledge comes from experience. And if you want to believe somebody else for the time being, that's helpful, that's useful. but in the end, you'll believe your own experience. So
Yeah. So it seems like this is an invitation for an experience or an invitation for a realization
yeah,
through practices and
yeah, it is self-evident. I mean, I haven't mentioned music and dance, which is the biggest omission of all. If you're not practicing music and dance, then I think the best bit of Sufism has not yet made itself known to you. And when you do know music and dance, all of this philosophy stuff is just like, okay, well, that was helpful to get me where I am, but where I am is I can dance now, so that's what
yeah.
you know.
For that process, I feel, and through this, there's so much of the mind that the average person is going to have to get through. So much programming and conditioning and habits of thinking and believing that I feel we kind of got to strip some of that or address it a little bit. What do you think about that?
I think that the urge to help people is a requirement for the work that we're doing. The difficulty that we have is that you can't do more than you can do. And somebody comes to you, and you know that if you really gave them everything that they need, you've got nothing left for everyone else because it's just too much. So we have to pitch ourselves at a certain group of people. And what I would do, I'd make myself available to everyone. And then I found that by doing that, I couldn't actually give what I really wanted to give. Because there's some things that I can do that other people can't do. And it seems to me that that's the obvious thing that I have to do that. Otherwise, nobody else would do it. So I've kind of found what I do well and offered that to people that can receive it. And, um, I got this complex system that not everybody wants and not everybody can understand. So I'm not really offering it to everyone. There's some people that come to me and they want tea and sympathy, and it's fine. That's what they need at this stage in their process. It's just that that's not appropriate for me to offer that. I'm not very good at that. That would be a waste of my particular talents for me just to be a good listener, So I don't really do that very much. That's a part of what I do, but that's not what I do. So I'm trying to find out what only I can do and offer that to people that can actually receive it.
Do you think there's anything in putting this system together that any kind of aspect of unlearning or anything, do you find that would be, is that a part of the process?
Yeah, if your cup's too full, you can't add anything in, and most people have to empty their cup to get something else. And a lot of people come to me and ask me to compare my system to what they've been recently learning. And I don't know. Nor do I care. That's your business, not mine. And what I've done, I've studied a dozen different systems, and I found that I mix and match, and I've created my own blend of what I've been taught. So a little bit of the Aramaic prayer, a little bit of zikr from Sufism, some astrology, some tarot, and I've mixed it together and I've come up with the Sabian Mysteries package.
How do you imagine this package? Like a book, a course, a video series?
Yeah, a combination of those. There's a website, there's a video channel. I'm developing a book, the way in which I've actually learned all this stuff and how I've experienced it as well. The life and works of my own approach to things. And meetings, retreats, every sort of which way you come at it, and you get the atmosphere of the teachings, and you breathe in that atmosphere, and you find eventually that you know this stuff, and you wouldn't know when it happened. There wouldn't be an examination that you passed to give you a bit of paper, like, and now you're a Sabianologist or something. Now you're an astrologer. It just doesn't work like that. Esotericism never does. The unveiling of the esoteric world is not clear like climbing a ladder in recognized stages with numbers. It just clears like the mist clears in the early morning, and you just realize stuff now. It's clearer now than it was before.
Okay, so are you kind of against a certification system? You don't want that for this?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It feels a little cheesy, doesn't it?
I well, I have done it before. I've certified dance leaders and so on. But I started to take the piss out of it. I got a whole seal developed, and I gave them a certificate with a big seal on it, and I signed it, and I had counter signature. Something to put on their wall. And I was taking the piss, but they didn't realize it, so I stopped doing it. Now, if anybody's trying to tell me whether or not I'm more enlightened than I was last year, or more enlightened than they are, or whatever, I don't know. It's not where I go, really.